My name is
Yes.
Meredith Swartz. I am the purchasing director over at DOA. DOA is basically the business unit for the state. So we have a lot of different divisions that we buy for and therefore have very different purchases for goods and services for the state, for the other departments within the state. We have our advocacy program, which is why I've partnered close with the Hub office to create this training. I think it's a great training, and most of you are Hub vendors. So when we get into how to register with the state and how to register to become a Hub vendor, I know that the majority of the people on the call are Hub vendors. So we'll kind of skim through that, but that information is here. We will give you a copy of this presentation, but feel free to take your own notes as we go along, but you will get a copy of this presentation after today. So first of all, I'm just going to kind of go through our groups at DOA. We have the advocacy groups, which include the Hub office, Indian Affairs, non-public ed, and Council for Women, Youth, and Survivors group. So they buy a lot of consultant service. Of course, everybody buys office supplies and things like that, but they buy a lot of unique things to help the community groups within their different areas. Then we have asset management underneath us. We manage all of the buildings in the downtown complex, the state complex. So a lot of facility management, anywhere from boiler maintenance to janitorial contracts. We have state construction, which is under DOA. That is if state construction needs to buy something for state construction. We'll go over the different rules and laws and policies and procedures today as well. And you will see that state construction has a very different set of rules than we do at goods and services purchases. But if state construction has to buy something for them, they come through my office. We have state parking. We manage all the parking decks and parking lots in the downtown complex. And state property. We rent and lease property all across the state, plus all of the property that we own. Then we have state services. We're going to talk about Mail Service Center, what they do. Motor Fleet manages all of the vehicle fleets for the state. Purchase and contract. You're going to hear me talk a lot about PNC. They are the governing authority on buying goods and services within the state. They write those rules and those laws and work together with the legislature to help write those laws and procedures to be able to buy within the state. However, PNC is one of my divisions, so if PNC has to buy something, such as the e-procurement system, that then comes through my office to actually purchase it. State and federal surplus property, we're going to show you how that can actually be an advantage to, that division can be an advantage to you guys as small business owners, where you can go and buy used state property from federal and state surplus property. Then we are the land of the misfit toys. We have all of these small divisions that aren't big enough to have their own fiscal offices. So we also buy for State Board of Elections, Human Resources, Lieutenant Governor's Office, and Military and Veteran Affairs. So with that, we have a large range of who we buy for, and so therefore a lot of different things we buy for, not just simple, services where we're just getting something fixed, but also consultant service and things for boards of elections during the election time. It's all very different and a very diverse group that we buy for. So during this course, we're going to talk about the rules of state procurement, those rules and laws that govern how we buy. We're going to talk about how to register with the state. And like I said, if you are already a Hub vendor, you are already registered, but that information will be here for your use. We're going to talk about e-procurement and EVP, which is the EVP has been updated. That is the electronic vendor portal. That is where you registered. We're going to talk about the Hub program and how that benefits the state as well as you guys. We're going to talk about seeking competition. So how do we reach out to the vendor community to seek competition? Then when we post those opportunities, what are the response methods of how you send in your response? And then we're going to talk about evaluation methods. So when we get those responses, how do we evaluate those and what constitutes a good bid versus a bad bid, and those types of things, and how to really submit a good proposal to the state. Then we're going to talk about the award process and how you get paid and all of that. So once you have an award, the back end of contract monitoring. So this is a lot of information. Like I said, it's drinking from the fire hose, but we're here to answer any questions, so utilize that chat as we go along. All right, so we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about the rules, the laws of state procurement. We do have different procedures for goods versus services. We have several different types of contracts. And then we start talking about delegations and the policy and procedures that drive how we buy. So with everything within state government, there are government statutes that are written by the legislature because we are using taxpayer money. So with that, there are rules and laws that govern how we buy. Those are written by the general statutes. And then from there, purchase and contract, as well as you're going to hear me say DIT, which is the Department of Information Technology, has their own set of administrative code that governs how we buy IT procurements. So we have PNC and IT procurements, both are under a certain administrative code where we take the laws and write rules about how the process works. Then from there, there is a North Carolina procurement manual for both IT and PNC, and that gets into our actual procedures. So where does this go when it needs approval, and where does this go to post, the actual procedures of how we buy. Then every state agency, so state agency, university, community college, municipality, all of those have their own procurement manual. In that procurement manual, we'll tell them how they purchase small purchases. So each agency is a little different on how they handle their small purchases. I'm going to tell you how DOA handles their small purchases. Anywhere where it's specific to DOA within this presentation, I've tried to highlight in yellow, and I will try to say, hey, this is only for DOA. Every state agency could be different within their manual. We use the budget manual for travel needs. So anytime that lays out the rules and the procedures of how we manage travel for state employees. So we talk about those governing authorities. If you would like to have a nice fall asleep, something to fall asleep to, you can go and pull up the administrative code. Each one of these different sections by different ways and different rules. And therefore, there's administrative code for purchase and contracts, which is state standard goods and services. That's general statutes, Chapter 143, Article 3, and Administrative Code, Title 1 and Chapter 5. Then we have the information technology purchases, and that's really anything that touches data or has a software or a hardware element. So more and more things are falling under the statutes and the administrative code for Department of Information Technology. So anything that has that touches data, whether we give you data, you give us data, we're buying some kind of software, or it has a software element that has to touch one of our servers or anything like that, now is becoming an information technology purchase. Those purchases are governed under General Statutes 143, Administrative Code, Title 9, Chapter 6. And then there's state construction services. So state construction, when it becomes a state construction purchase, it is any construction, renovation, or alteration of physical properties. So anything under state construction would require a design review element. We can replace still under goods and services like for like. We can do concrete. We can do some things like that. What we can't do is if we are getting into wiring, moving walls, or actually physically altering a property. So those procurements are under General Statutes 116, 143, and 153, and there is a state construction manual. Today, when we're going through the rules and the processes and procedures, we are going to focus on goods and services purchases. So either PNC purchase or DIT, information technology purchases. So who are your potential customers as being signed up and registered to do business with the state? We have 28 executive state agencies. We have 58 community colleges, 16 public universities. We have over 2,500 charter schools. We have 100 counties, and then we have 500 plus municipalities, towns, cities, things like that. Most of the rules today do apply, or at least these different agencies have the ability to use things like our state term contracts. We at state agencies are mandated to use some of these things by statute, but these other agencies are still able to use our state term contracts. They still may use the e-procurement system, but state agencies are mandated to use it. So there are some nuances there, but as a whole, when we start talking about delegations and processes and procedures, this applies to all of them on a general setting. But we are going to focus on executive state agencies because that is where I am. So when you talk about those state agencies, there are 28 of them. We've got DOA, which is me, Department of Administration. Then we have Department of Commerce, Environmental Quality, DHHS, Information Technology, Military and Veteran Affairs, which is another one of those agencies that I assist. We have Natural and Cultural Resources, Public Safety, Revenue, Transportation, Agriculture, Insurance, Justice, Labor, Public Instruction, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Lieutenant Governor, which is another one that falls under me, State Auditor, Administrative Hearings, Board of Elections, which is one of mine, Community College System Office, the Education Lottery, General Assembly, Office of the Governor, Ports Authority, State Controller, and Wildlife. So those are all of the state agencies that fall under these exact same rules. But like I said, those other entities can also fall under the same procedures. They just might not be mandated to some of these procedures. So what happens first when somebody's got to buy something? They come to me and say, hey, I got to buy XYZ. And we are the question people. We start asking the questions. So we start saying, what are you trying to buy? What, is it a good? Is it a service? How much does it cost? Have you gone out and done some market research to kind of find out a general amount so that that will then drive some of our procedures? Do you have any money? We get so far and then there's no money. So we always up front, do you have the money? Has this gone through budget before we start working on this process? And then we say, well, how do you buy it? What kind of documentation is needed to make sure that we're justifying how we're buying this? Because all purchasing procedures are pretty much determined by two things. What are you trying to buy and how much money does it cost? So when we talk about how much money it costs, what is the delegation that then drives the procedures? So we have different rules for goods versus services. We have mandated resources that we have to use that are within state government versus open market. Open market is going out into the vendor community to purchase anything, goods or services. Different rules and different documentation needed depending on how much money we're spending. So different delegations. And then there's always something special circumstances that happen in procurement, whether it be emergencies or sole source or things like that. So we're going to go over these in detail of what those different things are and how they drive our procedures. So we talk about goods versus services. Well, first, what is a good? What constitutes a good? It is something that is tangible. It's either commodities, supplies, materials, equipment, or other tangible property. And know that as a vendor, if we are purchasing a good through e-procurement, the vendor is charged a 1.75 fee. And we're going to get into that fee, what it's for, how it works, but it is for goods only on that fee. So what are goods? We buy vehicles because we have VodaFleet. We buy millions of dollars worth of vehicles. Also, everybody's got to buy office supplies. It doesn't matter. But those are tangible things. So there could be a shipping element attached to it, but it is a goods, tangible property that has to be shipped to us. When we talk about services, services is intangible work that's performed by an individual that has specialized knowledge or experience or some certain capabilities. That could be anything from plumbing to power washing to actual consultant service. And there are some nuances with some different types of services, including consultant service that requires a couple of different things. So we're going to get into the different types of services that we buy and those procedures. When I said mandated resources, there are several different agencies within the state that provide services to the other departments or the universities or the community college, any government entity. We have these other areas that are within state agencies, so we can keep those taxpayer dollars and use them wisely to stay within the state. So before we can go out to open market, we have a couple of things that we must consider. We have mandatory state term contracts. And we're going to get into state term contracts and how they're written. Some are mandatory, some are convenience, but the state agencies, not the universities, and I don't think the community colleges, are mandated to use those state term contracts, but state agencies are. So if they're mandatory, we have to buy off those mandatory state term contracts. The other agency that we can utilize is Correction Enterprises. So Correction Enterprises is a department or division of adult corrections within the state that used to be a part of DPS. They have now broken off, so it includes the prison system. Correction Enterprises is an organization or a department that allows our inmates to learn a trade or a skill while in prison to hope to part of rehabilitation, re-release efforts. So while they are incarcerated, they can learn that trade or skill to be a functioning member of society and get a job when they get out of prison. So Correction Enterprises provides those skills to state agencies. So any of our printing capabilities, they have a print shop, they have a cannery, they have they build all of our desks. You can buy furniture from them. Any kind of framing, they have a frame shop, things like that. So we do have Correction Enterprises that is considered a state term contract that we can utilize their services. The one thing I want you to take away from today is that state and federal surplus property is open to the community, open to anybody within the state. That is where anything that is replaced within the state, any equipment, vehicles, anything, there is a warehouse over off of Chapel Hill Road that is state property, state surplus property. They hold auctions for their vehicles, but if you need something like a filing cabinet or you need desks or you need anything like that, they have computers. They have used state equipment that they resell to the community. So it's cheap, it's good stuff that, we replace our stuff fairly often. So utilize their services. You can go out there and walk their warehouse and buy directly from them. Mail Service Center handles all of our mass mailings. So you think about your car registration, the DMV, when you get your registration, all of that goes through the Mail Service Center because we get a break on postage. So anytime we have a mass mailing, we are required by statute to go through the Mail Service Center to send out any kind of mass mailing. State Construction Office, we already talked about that. That is where they have those different administrative codes for construction projects. So anything that potentially could be renovating or changing altering a building, a state property, then we go through the State Construction Office. And it very well could be something small that they say, this is too small for us to handle, y'all just go ahead and do it. But we give them first crack at it to make sure it doesn't need to go through that design review. Then we have State Property Office. So State Property Office manages all of our lease properties. So anytime we have a lease, we need to go through state property. They negotiate those leases and sign those leases for the state. Then we have anything where we are going to contract with another state agency. So intergovernmental contracts between, let's say, our department and the university to do some kind of consultant service or anything like that. Anytime we are contracting between two state agencies, we do that on a contract called an MOU or Memo of Understanding. So we do have those things to keep those taxpayers' dollars within the state and use that wisely to be self-sufficient before we go out to the vendor community. We talked briefly about the state term contracts. So there are state term contracts for both PNC and DIT. They are written at the level of statewide procurement or statewide DIT. They are for every state agency and university, community college. Anybody can use them. Like I said, some are mandatory, some are convenient. State agencies are obligated to use the mandatory state term contracts. The whole purpose of a state term contract is the vendors can provide their service to the entire state. And then we get better pricing based on data driven by our state term contracts. So yeah, we may pay more for this phone, but we pay less for these earpods because we buy more of the earpods. So we're able to do that, get better, lower prices, good quality products, and be able to negotiate delivery and things like that. On PNC's website, you're going to hear me talk a lot about the different websites today that we use. In the back of this presentation is a list of all the websites that I talk about. PNC and DIT, both on their websites, have a searchable list of all of the state term contracts. You can look that up. It also tells you who the contract manager is. All state term contracts are bid out just like regular contracts. You can submit a bid to be on a state term contract just like you would any other contract. Included in that list is when the contract's going to expire, who the contract manager is. Some of the contracts, especially the DIT contracts, are open bidding. So that means they are continuously adding people to the contract. I know the staffing contract is like that, and I think they have a couple more where they continue to analyze and add vendors even throughout the term of the contract. I don't know which ones. I know the staffing one is like that, but look out on their websites, contact that contract manager. You can always ask them for that, or there is the information for that particular contract that's out on the website. So when we start talking about open market agency delegation, this is now where we're going out to the vendor community. None of those mandatory resources meet our needs. We've got to now go out to the vendor community to meet the need. Every state agency, university, community college has a set general purchase delegation, which the state procurement officer at PNC and DIT can approve to raise that delegation or lower that delegation. So all purchases that are under that particular agency's delegation are handled at the agency level. They don't require extra approvals. They handle them in-house. There are certain procedures depending on still money within that, but anything under that agency's general delegation is handled by the agency. Anything over that delegation does require additional approvals either by PNC or DIT. For us, our general delegation, this says 50,000, we were actually just raised to 100,000, but we'll keep it at 50 for this. So 50,000 is a general delegation for PNC, standard goods and services. At DIT, our general delegation is 25,000. So anything over 50,000, we have to get PNC's approval for. Anything under 25,000, or over 25,000 for DIT purchase, we have to get their approval. And that was yellow, so that was DOA. This is yellow too. This is specific to me. So this is our open market purchasing policy. So for DOA, we have procurement cards, a P-card program, which is run by Bank of America. So we do, some of our, not everybody in the department has a P-card, but some people have P-cards, and if they do, they can buy using a P-card anything under $1,000. There are some nuances. They can't use it for fuel. They can't use it for state term contract items. There are some rules with that P-card, but as a general rule, anything under $1,000, they can go use their P-card and buy whatever they need. Anything under $29,000, so the statewide small purchase delegation is $29,000 for PNC goods and services. So for that, at $29,000, our requisitioners can go out and either get one hub quote and move forward, Or if there is, for some reason, they have documented and they can't find a hub vendor, or there is no hub vendor in that area, then they need to go out and get 3 quotes. We go with the lowest quote and issue the PO. From 29 to 50,000, we call informal competition. We are required to get 3 quotes, and we are required to get the vendor to sign the terms and conditions of doing business with the state. So this is where we get into an actual solicitation document, and we'll go through all the different types of documents that we use, but we use an RFQ for informal quotes, or we have an informal PDF quote where it gets that vendor to sign the terms and conditions. Anything over 50 grand is now considered formal competition. This is where it's either an IFB, which is a invitation for bid, or an RFP, a request for proposals. It is posted on EVP. It is out there for the world to submit a bid on. It does require PNC approval before we post and before we award. For IT purchases, we consider anything under 5 grand a small purchase. So we just need a quote and we move forward. From 5 grand to 25,000, we require 3 quotes and go with the lowest quote to move forward. Anything over that 25,000 is that general delegation that requires the formal bid that's the formal bid level, and it's either on an IFB or an RFP. It's posted on on EVP for the world to bid on. It does require security reviews to make sure that our data is stored correctly and things like that before we can post and before we can award. So anything that's in the small purchase area, so micro purchase, small purchase, informal, and small purchase, any of these are not posted out for the vendors to see. Those are handled internal. Our requisitioners go into EVP to find the vendors to do the work and reach out directly to those vendors. Any contracts that we estimate to be over $1 million must be reviewed by our legal department. So that happens before we award and before we post. So all of those extra approvals is why those bigger purchases take a little bit longer for us to complete. All right, so term contracts, when we talk about our overall contracts, we have standard term contracts, which is just a binding agreement between us and the vendor to provide services, commodities within at the prices within. It's usually just based on cost, but it's a standard term contract. Agency-specific term contracts work like the state term contracts, but they're written for a particular agency. So if you ever see an agency-specific contract, it's where there is no quantity. We usually give you, this is what we bought in the past under this contract, but we are not guaranteeing anything going forward. So the award is based on historical data, and then so that's how much money we would attach to that contract, but we don't guarantee that we're going to buy off of it, but it's there for that agency to need. An example of that would be we have one of these for emergency restoration services. So detecting mold, mildew, recovering from floods, things like that. Where we put that contract out for bid, vendors were able to bid on it. It includes response times. It includes what they have to do when they get there. All the contract management of it is included in the contract, but we only use it as we need it. So we issue purchase orders against it as we need it if there's a flood or we need mold remediation. Standard contract term is 3 years for every agency. They can be longer, but we have to get approval to go any longer than 3 years. On the majority of the times, that's not just 3 years flat. Usually most agencies have contracts set up for 1 year with 2 optional renewals. Those options are up to the state on whether they want to exercise those. So that still altogether could be a max of a 3-year term. When we talk about service contracts, like I said, there's two different types of service contracts. There's just regular contractual service, which is just where we are contracting with a vendor to provide a service, and they have specialized knowledge, experience, skills, staffing, whatnot. It could be examples, janitorial, landscaping, medical lab services, hazardous waste, security guards, training instructors, building maintenance, things like that, where they're coming out, performing a task, and then we're just paying for it. Consultant service is a little bit different. So consultant service, according to procurement, we know that some people identify as consultants. But if a vendor is coming in and analyzing one of our programs, and they're going to say, this is what my expertise says that you could, here's my analysis, and here is my counsel or my advice on how you can make things better with that program, that's what we consider a consultant service. Any of these types of services that are considered consultant service have to be approved by the governor's office. So with that, those take a little bit of extra time to complete a consultant service. One example of a consultant service is the Hub Office completed a consultant service when they did the disparity study. So they came in, they analyzed, how do we buy, how do we purchase, what are our rules, what are our laws, and all of that, and saw where there were any disparities on inclusion of hub vendors and things like that in those areas. They provided the analysis and the expertise and presented to the legislature, but they did not make those changes if there were any that were required. Then the legislature actually did, or the Hub Office actually did the work to make changes in policies and procedures. So they just gave their analysis and their expert opinions. Any vendor that's receiving payment for services over $600, they have to submit we get the 1099 form. So we talked a little bit about DIT, Department of Information Technology. They are under that different general statute. It's 143B 1320. That includes hardware, software, online database subscriptions, license agreements, pretty much data. So we have things like HVAC maintenance now, where if there is a software that regulates the temperature in the building, that potentially has to go through that security review to know where the information of that software is being held, and where that software needs to be tied into our equipment or whatnot. So just be mindful that things that were always just the standard goods and services potentially will have to go through a DIT process now, because there is some kind of element to that. Statewide DIT procurement, which is SITP, they are the ones that approved those purchases. They are two separate, so they are not goods and services, they are DIT procurement. DIT also has state term contracts. They have them for IT software, hardware, telecom, and IT services such as we do have that staffing contract where we can put developers and stuff under a contract. That is a statewide contract that we can buy off of. Just know if you ever see a DIT procurement, be on the lookout in that solicitation that you may be required to submit a VRAR, which is a vendor readiness assessment report that is telling us where you're holding your data. Also, there could be requirements for SOC 2 and things like that, all about where your information and where the data is going, how it's stored, and all of that. And that could potentially be a requirement to be stored somewhere extra safe or things like that. So just be mindful when you see the bids out there for DIT purchases, read them thoroughly and make sure that you submit everything you're supposed to be found responsive. There are always special things. So there are special things within procurement. One of those is waiver of competition. That is any time that we are buying something that means other than competitive bidding. So just examples could be sole source, brand specific, where it has to be this certain brand because we already have this and that's what fits together. Emergency purchases, things catch on fire and buildings flood. We have emergency purchases. standardization, that could be where we already own this piece of equipment. We need this piece of equipment to work with that piece of equipment. It could be an ongoing job or task. Maybe the vendor already bid and did this piece of it. It would not make sense to do this continuation of that project. So it only makes sense for that vendor to continue on. There is a list of what is an approved waiver of competition within the administrative code, which is 01 North Carolina Administrative Code 05B 14.01. So I'm gonna stop there for a minute. I know the chat was going crazy. Carla, if you can get me as to where we are.
Sure, there are questions in the chat. Richard was asking if there are hub requirements in the IT purchase area.
So
Yes, go ahead, Meredith.
Okay. So there are not hub requirements in overall state procurement. So there are no set-asides in state procurement. Every agency is allowed to add hub requirements in their small purchase area. What is overall in the general statutes about hub is that we have a 10% aspirational goal to do business with hub vendors. So in order to reach that goal in our small purchase areas is one of those areas that each agency can make those efforts. And that's where in our goods and services area, we put our efforts at DOA. So that's DOA in that small purchase area where it's under $29,000. We can move forward with just one hub vendor quote. And then from 29 to 50, we get 3 quotes, but one of them has to be a hub vendor quote. So that's where we put our hub efforts in DOA's small purchase area. So we don't have that in the IT purchase area under our small. It's only in the goods and services for DOA.
We have a question from Katrina who wants to know, where would nursing scrubs contracts fall under?
So I'm not sure if there is a state term contract for apparel or something like that. I know we have a uniform contract, but if we are strictly buying scrubs, I don't ever buy scrubs, so I don't know if there's a state term contract. But if there was one, it would be a purchase and contract, state term contract that would be out on PNC's website. If not, then each agency, if they had that need, would post that need. If their need is 50 grand or more, would post that need out on EVP. And then if it's under that, then each agency would go through and try to find a vendor to provide that need under their small purchase rules.
All right. And then next question, would IT staffing fall under staffing or IT?
We have an IT staffing state term contract. So it's not just for staffing, it's for IT staffing. So that's a DIT state term contract.
There's the next question. There are a few questions that we're going to answer in the chat. They're leaning towards hub questions.
Okay.
Also, the next question after those is, where would headstone, tombstones setting fall under?
Huh. Surprisingly, I did a bid for that. DMVA manages the veteran cemeteries. And so I have done that in the past. We'll get into looking at commodity codes. And so that is where that was definitely a goods and services, just a standard goods and services purchase. It wasn't state construction. We did it as a standard goods and services purchase through PNC rules. It was posted out for people to bid on. It's been many years ago. But that's where it was. And when we get into the commodity codes, I'll show you how to find the correct commodity code and make sure you're registered. for that commodity code.
All right. I think that is all the questions that would be answered with you, Meredith. The rest we
Perfect.
will answer in the chat.
All right, I'll keep going. All right, so we're going to get into doing business with the state. We're going to talk about e-procurement, the basics of e-procurement, how to register with EVP. Like I said, if you're a hub vendor, you're already registered with the EVP, but we're going to get into that and make sure that you know what you're looking for when you're in there, updating your registration. We're going to also talk about the upgrade that happened in 2020 to e-procurement and some nuances with that. So e-procurement basics, e-procurement is our ordering system. So it is used by most state agencies. I believe DIT or DOT might be the only one that doesn't use e-procurement for their ordering system. E-procurement provides a single point of access to all governmental agencies. Like I said, everybody can use it. It links between EVP, you're going to hear me talk about Ariba sourcing. So it links between both of those. All of those things are all managed by the same group of e-procurement. So it allows that access and that visibility to be able to see everything. It is increased order accuracy through receipt of electronic orders with consistent purchasing order format. It allows us to have multiple lines to a PO. It allows us to separate those lines by fiscal year. So we encumber the money separately. We only encumber the money for this fiscal year versus next fiscal year, things like that. Many of the state term contracts allow us to have a searchable catalog within the system. So say something like our office supplies, which is that state term contract, is a hub vendor. FSI is our office supplier under that state term contract. When we go to buy office supplies, we are within e-procurement. When we start with our requisitions phase, it links us to FSI's website and then auto-populates the lines into our requisition to then go through approval flows to then cut POs from. So there is that capability with our state term contracts to link to a vendor's website. Vendors are charged a 1.75 fee for goods only. Goods only. So if you are selling us goods, tip number one you're going to get today, separate out your shipping, because shipping is a service and not a good. It's based on the commodity code. Therefore, that 1.75 fee would only be assessed to the goods portion of that procurement. What is that 1.75 fee used for? It allows us, it pays for e-procurement. So it allows us to conduct business electronically. Vendors are able to reach us directly. We have searchable lists now using EVP to find vendors and benefit from cost saving. Back in the day, we would handwrite carbon copy POs. All of that now is done electronically. It also offsets the cost for the development of the system, the maintenance, the ongoing operations, including the help desk. If you have any problems with e-procurement, whether it be EVP, whether it be e-procurement, whether it be sourcing when you're going to submit a bid, contact our help desk. They are the first ones to be able to point you in the right direction, make sure you have access to everything and that you're registered appropriately. So contact the help desk. We're going to show you what those numbers are here in a minute. How do you benefit from e-procurement? Well, it gives you access to all of us. It lets you market. We can look up a commodity code and say, here are the vendors. And it allows us to say, here are all the hub vendors that are under that commodity code, and do those searchable types of lists to hopefully increase our hub spend. It is a single point of access to the entities, the public schools, and the community colleges, because we all use e-procurement. Increase order accuracy, because we can make change orders to those POs to make sure our invoicing is matching our POs for payment. It allows us to actually say that we have received something. So the minute we have received it, you can then invoice against that PO. Potential for supplier cost savings, because all that marketing is happening through the system and it's electronically getting to you for orders. So with the upgrade that happened in 2020, we moved to a cloud-based system. And the biggest change that we made is we changed the commodity codes. When we made that change in 2020, if you were already registered to do business with the state, there was an automatic transfer of the commodity codes in which you are registered to these new codes. I suggest you go into EVP today, to this week, and look at the commodity codes in which you are registered. That is a big thing. That is what is notifying you of the opportunities. That is notifying us of that you provide this service. The commodity codes that you pick are very, very important. Know that we are using now UNSPSC codes. UNSPSC codes are actually nationally recognized codes. If you go to the website UNSPSC, you can search by code, you can search by number, you can search by all these different searches. Just know that e-procurement is only using the first 6 digits of the code. These codes are actually 8 digits nationally. We only use the first 6 digits. But if you find something that you know is specific to you, such as tombstone repair, then it might not be tombstone repair at the 6-digit level. It could be, I don't know, landscaping repair or something. Probably not that general, but it still could be something up above. Just know that we are using the code level, not the actual individual specialized codes. Know that all services, so the codes that are entered that start with 7, 8, or 9 are considered services codes. Those are the codes that you are not charged the 1.75 fee when they are attached to a line item on a PO. So 7, 8, and 9 are service codes. All of the other codes that start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are all goods. EVP registered vendors were automatically transitioned, so I suggest just go out there, look at your registration, make sure that you're registered for the codes that you actually do the work. Because what that code drives is the automatic notices when things are posted. And like I said, that's how we look up vendors, is we're looking under those codes too. Vendor training on all of the updated features. You're going to hear me talk about the eProcurement website, just eprocurement.nc.gov. And there is all kinds of training for vendors out there. There's job aids, there's videos, there's everything. If you have any questions about eProcurement, the sourcing tool, or EVP. So EVP was updated last summer in July. It is now our automated business opportunity. It notifies vendors based on the commodity codes in which they are selected when something is posted. So it replaced IPS, where we used to post our bids. Now we're posted out on EVP. It keeps our vendor information. It allows you to log in there and update your vendor information. Make sure that you go out and know who is registered. Whoever is registered for your company, the email addresses, the addresses, all of that, the remit to addresses is where we're sending checks. All of that information needs to be updated in EVP, because that is how we notify vendors that there's opportunities, how we pay you, how we send you POs, and how we look for you to even give you business. So make sure that your EVP is up to date. It is a one-stop registration for eProcurement to receive purchase orders, formal bid solicitations, receive notices of bid opportunities. It's also the place where you register to do business, or register as a hub vendor now is included in EVP, and it allows us and you to use the vendor search. And we're going to tell you how to utilize that vendor search to even research primes and things like that you could go together to submit a bid. Carla, do you have something? No?
I do not.
All right, so the benefits of the new EVP is that it consolidated the functionality of state government in 3 procurement applications. So we were using IPS for this, and EVP for this, and eProcurement for this, and so now it's all consolidated and talks together. For vendors, the new EVP improves and simplifies access to multiple functions. So you can register to do business with the state, You can view and submit your bid opportunities through EVP, which replaced IPS and NC bids. Both of those functions are now gone and replaced by EVP. It also allows you to register as a small business enterprise or a hub vendor, and it also allows you for visibility of the bid process, including bid tabulations and awards. So when we're going through the bid process, we post those out for visibility. And they don't go away. In IPS, when we used to post bid tabs and bid awards, 30 days after award, it went away. And that is no longer the case. You can go out there and see anything that was initially posted on EVP and awarded on EVP will stay out there for infinity years, out there forever. The new platform makes it easier for purchases for us to find vendors. Since the businesses, you used to only be able to register at a 4-digit code, you can now register at a 6-digit code. And then when you're uploading your files, you can upload larger files. So all great benefits from this new system. It is wonderful. It has been working great for us. We're very, very excited about it. To be registered, if you are a hub vendor, you have already done this. But you will need internet access, your federal tax ID or your EIN, and then a valid email address. This is the login to EVP. If you weren't already registered, you can hit register now, complete the registration process. It is free. If you have any problems with eProcurement, EVP, or Ariba, this is the help desk number or email address. Contact them. They can help you if you somehow are locked out. If you need to update your information and you can't figure out where to put something, reach out to the help desk. They can hand walk you through it. If you are trying to submit a bid and you have a problem with Ariba, call them. They can help you. If you, for some reason, can't get paid and something is like my remit to address doesn't match what my EIN number is, call the help desk. But make sure that that is the case, that your remit to address matches what's on your tax ID information, or else it gives us screwy things as of late. But if you have any problems with any of our systems, as far as procurement systems, call the help desk. They can help you out. I'm gonna stop there. Any questions?
Looks like we have covered the questions in the chat. We have a hand raised if Eli wants to unmute.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I think we have another hand, which is Marquisha.
Yes, we can go to Marquisha. If you
Are
want
you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my question is how often, because I hadn't registered any of my stuff for 2024, and I think it was like the middle of 2023 with my hub certifications and everything. Is that something that has to be done on a yearly basis, or how often?
So your hub registration has to be updated every 4 years. So if
Every
you
4.
registered in 2023, it should still be active. With that said,
Okay.
it's not going to hurt to go out on EVP and make sure you're active.
Okay. And is that the same for like the NC DOT certifications and everything else?
Harley, you can answer that. I'm not sure.
Your NCDOT certifications are good for a year, so you do have to renew those annually for DOT.
Okay. NC DOT, and I think the other one was like the Black owned the women's owned certification. Is that yearly as well?
So it depends on which one it is. If it is one that's issued by federal government, that's through Small Business Administration, then we'll have to make contact there in order to get your registration done. Sometimes you will see a woman owned as a part of the DBE, or even on the hub. Sometimes you may see it based on the category, whether you're registered as a minority or a woman. But if it's truly a woman-owned small business certification, yeah, we'll get information from SBA on that one. I'll put my
Okay.
contact information in the chat. And I'm sorry, good morning, everyone. I'm Shay McIntyre from the Hub office, and I'm in business development there. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Let's see, Meredith, as far as the chat, I do not see any other questions that haven't been answered. There are no other hands raised, so I think we can proceed.
All right. All right, so we're going to talk about the Hub program now. Like I said, I'm going to kind of skim through this because I know the majority of you are already Hub vendors. If you have any problems with registration, reach out to the Hub office. I want to advocate for Hub because you are one of my divisions. This is a great program. Being a Hub vendor, you get a lot of extra opportunities, such as this course. We also are now teaching a course, I Have a Contract, Now What?, that is about contract administration. You have opportunities for Meet the Purchaser events and different networking events. So make sure that you're reaching out to the Hub office, following them on their website, look at their calendar of events, sign up for what you can. It is always great information. They always do a great job of putting on different events where you can learn how to get capital and how to do all of these extra things. That is just a wealth of information for small business. So make sure you utilize those opportunities that you get as a Hub vendor. With the Hub program, it was put together with Executive Order 25 and General Statute 143-128-2, identifies what the Hub program is all about. Like I said, there is no state set aside in goods and services purchases. There is an aspirational goal that is both for goods and services and construction services. So know that we have that goal. We have extra efforts that we do. We document our efforts. Most of the state agencies have a Hub plan to try to meet and or exceed that goal. In EVP, you are marked, once you have registered and certified as a Hub vendor, you are marked within our system. So it allows us to say, hey, I need painters. And so we can go out and pull up only Hub vendor painters to be able to get our 3 quotes from, to ensure that we're trying to meet that goal. So it allows our requisitioners and our end users to be able to search for those Hub vendors using our EVP system. Hub application and certification and recertification is now all processed through EVP. So that new system, like I said, is fantastic. It has allowed the Hub office to now digitally do certification and recertification. This is a DOA slide. It is in yellow. These are our Hub efforts. When I first came over to DOA as the director, our Hub numbers looked really bad. We were sitting about 2 or 3. And so I met with the then director to try to see what could we do to increase, and especially being that Hub is one of ours. We do have a unique problem at DOA because we buy vehicles, and we buy a boatload of vehicles, and vehicles are not cheap. And we have to buy them off the mandatory state term contracts that there are no Hub vendors on. So that really affects our spend. But if you take that spend out and you look at to where we have implemented these efforts, if you take out our state term contract spend, we are well above our 10% just in doing these simple efforts. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of my team They make sure that those quotes are coming from the community to make sure that we're trying to increase our hub spend. So some of those efforts are that we added hub language, which we were the kind of pilot for that, to all of our solicitation documents. So now that is standard in all state agencies and all of our templates that we push out. Identify, are you a hub vendor? One, can I use this towards my hub spend? Then second, do you identify as a hub vendor? Are you a woman, minority owned, disabled owned business, but you are not certified? If you identify as that and you submit a bid, we send your information to the hub office to try to get you certified before we cut any POs. Then, are there any tier 2 vendors that are going to be working on this particular contract that are certified hub vendors? And we can capture that additional spend manually. So we added all that language to solicitations. We also work directly with the hub vendor. We project our upcoming projects. So we have an annual departmental procurement plan that we have to submit to PNC. And then tier 2 is a subcontractor. So we submit a departmental procurement plan that says these are the things that we have coming up for this year that we know of. We know things break, things happen randomly throughout the year, but these are the things we are expecting to do. We give that to the hub office to try to find our hub vendors to support those efforts. Our office at DOA, we report monthly to the hub office our upcoming opportunities. So by that point, we could have something like a water heater that's broken out of the State Public Health Lab that just posted the other day, and we have the site visit for tomorrow if anybody produces hot water heaters. So things like that, we can reach out to the hub office and say, hey, we have these things coming. I'm drafting that solicitation and getting ready to post it. Do you know of any hub vendors? Then we at DOA are lucky enough that we have a hub liaison on my staff. So she does a great job of saying, okay, we have these upcoming opportunities. She reaches out to the vendor community under the commodity code for which we are getting ready to be we're drafting this solicitation and say, hey, this is coming. Do you want to be put on our direct solicitation list? And so if so, is this something you actually want to be involved in? Because there are a lot of vendors that are just registered for every commodity code. But we say, hey, are you actually interested in bidding on this? When we go to post, we'll directly send it to you. So that's increased some of our participation. And then also when we do go to post, we notify the hub office. The hub office posts on their website, and then we directly solicit to the group that our hub liaison has made. So in all of that, including our small purchase efforts where we're getting that as hub quotes, has definitely increased our hub spend. This is our plan, like I said, with those hub quotes, is that we can move with one formal vendor quote. When we are in the 3 informal quotes, we have to get one that's a hub vendor, and then we directly solicit. Every time we go to renew a contract, we ask them those same sets of questions again. Are you a hub vendor? Do you identify as a hub vendor, and try to get them registered again. So the certification process, I'm going to blow through these slides, but you will get a copy of this presentation that has what you need to become a hub vendor. If there's ever any question, it outlines all the documents, depending on what type of business you are, that you need to become a hub vendor. Know that you have to recertify as a certified hub vendor every 4 years. The recertification is not nearly as crazy as first certification. So there is a reciprocity. If you are a registered disadvantaged business in Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, or Virginia, the paperwork needed to certify in North Carolina doesn't include all of this paperwork. There is a reciprocity certification options. However, it does not work the other way, sadly, that we know of. These are all those documents. I just want to let you know that they're there. I'm not going to go through it, but they're there in this presentation. I'm going to stop there.
And yeah, go ahead, Meredith.
It looks like the only question I see is, if my business is certified through SBA, does the hub utilize those certifications? That's a hub office question.
And I believe the women-owned small business is a reciprocity, and there is an option for reciprocity. That would fall under your being certified under certain national entities, and I believe that is one.
All right.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
have a question.
And just, oh, I'm sorry. May I just interject also?
Sure.
And that is right for the SBA certifications. Another one is the SDVOSB for service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, and so that one could qualify as in the disabled category for the certification for Hub.
Thank you, Shay.
Sure.
And somebody asked about the states. These are the states that is to get certified in North Carolina, not in those states. So the reciprocity says that if you are registered disadvantaged in these states, then it's easier to get certified in North Carolina.
That's correct. All right, and so hands raised, we have Augusta and then Adrian.
Hi, Meredith. Thank you for taking the time to conduct this webinar, this training. It's really good information. You mentioned refurbished equipment and chairs and computers at the local government, sell back to the community. You mentioned a warehouse. Where can I get that information, and what's the process on buying?
So I think John put it in the chat, but if you Google search DOA, one of the divisions of Department of Administration is state surplus property. So it's state surplus property. They're over off of Chapel Hill Road in Raleigh.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
Adriana?
if I could jump
Sorry.
in real quick, just, I don't think it was me that posted it, but the link does show that there are different sites around the state. The state surplus property is based in, I think it's actually Cary, but there's others at different universities, and they actually have a map on there that shows where the different surplus sites are. So if you're not located in the triangle, you may have other opportunities for surplus property.
Augusta?
And that
Yes,
the next
that
one.
was me.
Okay. Adriana?
Yes, I have a question. I'm a residential general contractor. I'm sorry. And I see that you sometimes need painters or flooring getting done. Do I need like a general, like a commercial general contractor license to able to bid on that?
So when we get into the bid process, you'll see if something like a certain license is required, it will say it in that particular procurement. There's nothing overall that says you have to have this certain license. However, it could be a requirement for that particular procurement. So when you're going through that solicitation document, that's where you would see that requirement may require you to upload that license with your bid response. So all of that information would be in that particular solicitation document that would be required.
Okay.
But overall, there is no requirement that says any work done by the state. There's nothing like that. So, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to push on. We're going to table any other questions because I know we're getting an effort of time. All right, so we're going to get into seeking competition. We're going to talk about our different types of solicitation documents, what is in those solicitation documents, the content, and we're going to talk about the differences between requirements and evaluation criteria. So when we talk about who is actually planning and writing these documents, it's up to our end user level, and you're going to hear me talk about the guy that turns the wrench. The guy that knows that his boiler is broken is the one that is identifying the need. He's the one that knows that his boiler is broken. He's also gathering all the information to get the boiler fixed. He could reach out to the vendor community just to help him gather scope, and maybe even just have somebody come and look at it and say, well, this is what needs to happen to fix it. So that could start the level. Let's say it is going to then be a total project that's over that 50 grand. That's where then it would go out for bid. But they are the ones that are gathering that information to help then draft the solicitation document. Once we get that scope from our end user, it's our job to review and make sure that all the logistics to make that project happen is within the actual document. So we could ask them, is a general contractor's license required? Do they have to move equipment to be able to get to it? That whole logistics to be able to write the actual solicitation document. Our solicitation documents become the contract once awarded. So whatever's in that actual solicitation document, that scope of work is what you would be held to complete that project. So whatever your response is, along with the solicitation document and anything else that happens during that bid process, that is your then contract. So we have a couple of different ways to solicit to vendors. Of course, the first one is just the direct quote. Those are for our small purchases up to $29,000. They can be done for goods and services. We're going to talk about P&C delegations here because that's the majority of what I buy. We all know if it was a DIT purchase, that number goes up to 25,000, not 29. But for P&C goods and services up to 29,000, the buyer is able to select from a list of registered vendors. So they go out on EVP to find the vendor to do the work based on the commodity codes in which they pick. They reach out and say, hey, I need a quote. Your quote needs to be 30 days valid, and it needs to be on some kind of branded letterhead. That quote is then attached in e-procurement. That e-procurement goes through approval flows internally to then it goes from that division leadership for approval to move forward with the purchase. It then goes to budget. There could be additional approval flows before it gets to purchasing. We make sure that the quote matches the requisition, that all the information is correct, and then we hit go, and that becomes then a PO. Informal quotes, so this is used where we've got to get the vendor to sign those terms and conditions. So that's between 29,000 up to 50,000. Sometimes we will do it for purchases less than that if our end user wants an actual contract with scope, but on the norm, this is from 29 to 50. We use this informal quote or IRQ for things that don't have a lot of scope details. So usually used for very simple goods. I need 7 widgets. You just need to tell me how much money they are and sign my T's and C's. We attach that in e-procurement and move forward. It's just a 4-page document where it literally is like a line item thing where you are adding your pricing. It can go back and forth through the vendor over email to be able to do that. So again, we pick the vendors using EVP, send it on, they reply back in email, we go with the lowest vendor and attach it to e-procurement. A request for quotes is a solicitation document. T's and C's are terms and conditions, yes. A request for quotes is a solicitation that's not normally used for advertising. So the RFQ does not go out for the world to see. It's not used for formal bids, but it is used for either those small purchases that are under that 50 grand that we have to get the terms and conditions that has detailed scope, or it can also be used when we have the waiver of competition. So if there's ever a waiver of competition where we just are getting the vendor under contract, this is the vehicle that we would use to send to the vendor to respond and become the contract for any of those waivers based on doesn't matter how much money. If it was a waiver of competition, we would use this document, or we can use it for seeking competition under our delegation of 50 grand. The response to this document, again, can be sent back and forth via email. I don't know anybody that uses fax anymore, but via email. Responses are open upon receipt. Sometimes they can have deadlines in it, but on the norm, it is just opened when we get it. There's no formal bid opening. Invitation for bid and the RFP are the two documents we use for formal solicitation. So an IFB is used for formal solicitation for well-defined goods or simple services. So if we know exactly what we want you to do when you show up, then that is usually what we use an IFB for. We are basing our award on lowest cost meeting specifications or requirements. So there could still be requirements in that solicitation or specifications that your good has to meet. But then it's based on cost once you get past the door of meeting the requirements. So that's usually what the award is based on, is meeting specifications or requirements and then offering the lowest cost. It can be used for purchases over $50,000. It is posted to EVP for a minimum of 10 days out onto our EVP system, where you find our formal bids posted. There are public bid openings, and there can potentially be site visits. There's going to be a schedule that tells you if there is a site visit, where to be, how to be, and what to do at that site visit. But that potentially could be in a formal bid. And we open those bids, stay locked in the system until the time of bid opening. A request for proposals is a combination where we're trying to buy complex services or a combination of goods and services where we could award on something other than just cost. So we may be evaluating on something other than just meeting requirements. We could look at what you've done in the past. We could look at who's doing the work. Those are evaluation criteria that we will go through and actually evaluate to make that award. We will know the end result. We want you to we know what our end result is, but we want you to provide the best solution, and then we evaluate that solution. And then that is still posted out on EVP for still 10 days, minimum of 10 days. And then we have public bid openings, and there could still be site visits within there. The other type of document, which we don't use very often, is called an RFI. If you ever see an RFI posted, we are strictly asking for information. I have used this often for when we're getting ready to buy a new computer system. We just kind of want to test the field, see what is out there and is offered, what kind of, to help us write technical specifications. It is literally used to gather information and ascertain the level of interest for potential bidders. It is not a solicitation document. It will not result in an award. It is not open to public record when we get it back. And you are not signing any terms and conditions or anything like that. So it is strictly just informational purposes for us to collect data to be able to eventually write an RFP. The response, after we close that response period and get those responses, we just cancel it on EVP. So this is PNC's outline to their solicitation documents. These are templates. Say that very loud. These are templates. These things can be rearranged within those templates, but on the average, this is where you will find the information in these 15-page documents. And so I'm just going to call out some areas where you really need to pay attention and know what's in them. So first is the why we're having to buy this. Maybe it cites a general statute or a rule or just an overall purpose of a division as to why they have to buy that. It will also include the contract term. So how long we are expecting this contract to be. Could be that 1 year plus 2 optional renewals, that kind of information. Section 2 is the information on how to bid. So it's going to include the schedule for the bid. It will include a question and answer period. So when you can submit, when, where, and how you submit those questions concerning that particular procurement. It will include what needs to come back with your bid, where you submit your bid, and then it could give you some definitions. We all speak at the state in letters and numbers. So lots of acronyms. It usually will explain any of those acronyms, what they actually mean. Section 3 is how we're going to evaluate that award. So if it's lowest cost, meeting specifications or requirements, it will state that in Section 3. If it is going to be based on, I want to know what you've done in the past, your vendor experience, your staffing plan, and your technical approach to the project, it will tell you how we're going to evaluate that. If this is going to be a best value where we're going to write a narrative on how we do that, it will state that. If it's going to be based on points, it will state that. All of the information on how we will award will be under Section 3. Under Section 4 is the requirement of being the contracted vendor. So it's going to talk about pricing, invoicing, delivery, warranty, if we're requiring reference. If we're asking for vendor experience, it could, under Section 3, say, this is the vendor experience I'm looking for. It could have proposal requirements, what's required to come back that we will then use to evaluate. Could ask for samples, financial stability. We could be asking for your financial statements, those licenses, those certifications. If we're going to do background checks, any personnel information could all be under Section 4. Section 5 is the biggie. This is the meat. This is what you will be held to if you are awarded that contract. So it's going to have the specifications, the tasks, the deviations, any kind of technical approach, your project organization, all of that will be under Section 5. Section 6 is the back end, how we're going to manage this contract. So it needs to include project manager information, any reports that would be due, if there's a problem during the bid, how does that work? If there's changes during the contract, how does that work? If there's recalls, things like that. And then in the back, we could have attachments. One, we're always going to ask you, how much is this going to cost me? So that's usually where your pricing form is. There's a standard instructions to vendors. Those terms and conditions, we're going to get you to sign those North Carolina terms and conditions. Location of workers, where is the work happening? Is it happening in the U.S. or overseas? EO 50, which is a price matching opportunity that we'll get into later, that's only for goods. Financial condition, might be asking you for your finances. Our hub thing, where we ask you, are you a hub vendor? Is there any tier 2 hub vendors? Are you a certified hub vendor? That is an attachment. We could have maps or diagrams or any other kind of information could be in those attachments. These are templates. These things can move around, but as a good rule of thumb, a PNC solicitation document is normally set up in this way. The other types of documents that we have is, like I said, everything is always changing in procurement. Nothing, we'll put something out and 2 days later, we got to change something. So anything that is changed during the solicitation process before opening is done on an addendum. This includes the answers to the vendor's questions that we received during the bid process. Anytime that once we open the bids and we're uncertain of something, we would use a request for clarification. When we get into negotiations on a contract, those are confirmed on what's called a BAFO, which is a best and final offer. And then once we have a contract, any changes are done on an amendment document. So we will get into the weeds of these documents, but overall, these are our 4 documents of change that we use throughout the bid process and contracting process. So when you are reading through these solicitation documents, the biggest thing is make sure you read what's in it. You are signing to provide the services and goods within at the prices that you've quoted within. You're agreeing to do what says the vendor shall. Make sure you look for the words shall, must, mandatory. When it comes to responsiveness, if it says vendor shall provide their general contractor's license with their bid, and if it is not there, you are automatically found responsive. So make sure that you're reading through it and you pay attention to those words of shall, must, and mandatory. Make sure you sign your bid. There's usually a block somewhere that looks something like this. If it is not signed, it's automatically rejected. That's a lot of work for it to not go anywhere. So make sure that you're signing your bid, because that is obligating your firm to provide the services within at the pricing within. And make sure whoever's signing that is authorized to sign it. then just make sure that you also do not put anything in a letter that says this is not a binding agreement, or something to the effect of this is a negotiable thing, because if we see that, it's automatically rejected. These things, when you submit your bid, you are binding your company to provide the services within, commodities within, at the prices within. We might get into negotiations, but if you submit a non-binding offer, it's automatically rejected. Solicitation schedule, so this is usually under section 2, is the outline schedule for the bid process. So when we talk about those 10 days, we're talking about between the time it is posted to the time you submit bids. If we've got all this other jazz in between here, it usually extends well longer than 10 days, but the code says it has to be out there for a minimum of 10 days. Be mindful that your site visit can be mandatory or urged and cautioned. If it's mandatory, you have to be there. And then the submit written questions. There's usually a deadline where those questions have to be submitted, and then we will provide the answers to all questions submitted. The contract award is the date that we plan to contract, to actually sign the contract and it to become effective. The effective date could be different. If we have a janitorial contract that starts on May 1, we could award the contract on April 15th, finish our background checks, but you actually start work under the contract on May 1. So those could be the differences between those two dates. You take nothing else from this contract, from this training, utilize the question and answer period to your benefit. You can ask anything. If you don't understand something in the solicitation, if you want to know what we're currently paying, if you want to know who currently has the contract, if you don't understand how we're going to evaluate, if you don't understand a task, it is your time to ask a question. We have to provide an answer to every question we get. Even if we get the same question 30 times, we still have to provide an answer. The answer could be look at question 1 or the answer to question 1. But use that question and answer period. If the agency is using the sourcing tool, we're getting those questions back through the message board. It will tell you where to submit those questions in the solicitation document. So it'll tell you whether you have to email them or if you use the message board or wherever, and how to submit those bids will be under section 2. Questions answered via phone or in person while we're on a site visit are not binding. If you want them to become part of the bid or part of the final contract, those need to be submitted in writing. Just know that when we post that addenda also becomes part of that contract. So that's binding once we answer those questions. All vendors' questions have to be submitted by the deadline. If they're not, we don't have to answer them. So just know that we collect all the questions. We don't say who submitted the questions. We create an addenda and we post that on an EVP in an addendum form so that everybody can see it. Note that some addendums are mandatory return. So they might have a signature block, and if you have to return it and you don't return it, you could potentially be found non-responsive. So make sure you look at the language of any addendum that's posted just to make sure that you don't have to sign and return it with your bid. We talk about site visits. We have 2 different types of site visits. There's not always a site visit, but sometimes there are. Sometimes there's a pre-proposal conference where we're just having a conference call. If there is one, that is in the solicitation document as to when and where and how you have to be and what happens during it. If it's mandatory, it's at a specific time, location. If you are late, you can come and hang out on the site visit, but we will not accept your bid. There is a sign-in sheet, and if your firm name is not on that sign-in sheet, your bid will not be accepted. So just know if it's mandatory, you have to attend. You have to be there throughout the entire site visit. Late vendors they can attend, but we will not accept their bid. Urged and caution is still at a specific time and location. The vendor still can sign in. You can be late. It's not nice to be late, but you can be late. Attendance is not a requirement to be able to, for us to accept your bid. So a lot of times if we have something where you need us to have access to the building, that's usually when we make it mandatory. If we're doing something in a parking lot and you can go drive by, that would be urged and cautioned. So, but if we feel like you need us to be able to put your eyeballs on whatever you're building, then we would actually have a mandatory state site visit. So supplemental, so when we talk about how you're submitting your bid, there will be instructions in that solicitation document. I believe all state agencies now are using the sourcing tool, including DOT. So, but they will tell you within that solicitation document if you are sending it via email. So if it was a waiver of competition or one of those informal solicitations, RFQ document, we can receive those by email. It could, if it's a formal document, it still could be by mail, but I don't think anybody's using the mail system anymore. We're now using the sourcing tool. When you're looking in these documents, look for requirements. Requirements are yes, no. They're not evaluated. You either have it or you don't. So it's either something that has to be submitted with your proposal to be found responsive, or something you have to meet to be able to be found responsive. Examples are the vendor must submit the product within 15 calendar days. So that's a requirement because it says must, and you have to deliver it within 15 calendar days. If you can't deliver it for 25 days, you might not meet that requirement. Vendor must submit with its proposal a copy of its general contractor's license. It has to be with your proposal, and if it's not there, you're automatically rejected. Vendor must submit with its proposal 3 references where it has performed similar work. So you have to submit that reference form. If it's not there, it's automatically rejected. We have the right to then look at those references and then determine if you've done stuff of the same size. Vendor must provide product service manual. If I saw that in the bid, that would alert me that says, hey, I need to ask a question. Do you want that service manual when I deliver the product if I'm awarded, or do I need to have it with my bid? Because it doesn't say. So if you see anything like that, that kind of gives you pause and you're like, should I send that with my bid or should I wait till we actually award it? That's your time to start asking those types of questions. So just use that question and answer period to your benefit to make sure that you're giving us a good proposal and that you know exactly what we're asking for. When we talk about criteria, evaluation criteria is the how. So how the vendor plans to complete the project, what have you done that we're going to look at and evaluate to make sure that we're giving the state the best option. So we could ask for the three biggies that are normally asked for are, what have you done in the past? So what is your vendor experience? What is your staffing plan? Who's going to do the work? What are their qualifications? And then what is your technical approach to the tasks outlined in the scope of work? So when we're looking at these and we're actually evaluating them, what we're evaluating is what has the vendor submitted and how does it relate them to the project we're asking them to do? So if we are asking for power washing of the Albemarle building, that is a 16-story building, 10-story building, that you're going to have to click in and hang off the side of the building and power wash the outside, and maybe we want to know what your experience is, and you tell me that you have power washed houses in a residential neighborhood, that is not of the same size and scope as to what we're asking you to do. If we're asking you to try to relate to similar clients and you say, well, I've done power washing for all of the Novant medical facilities in Charlotte, that's of the same size and scope of North Carolina. Provide the most information you can do to try to help us relate to what you've done in the past to what we're asking you to do. There is no limit on the amount of information. So if you're talking about your staffing and who's doing the work, relate what they've done Even if it's not for your firm, this person is going to be the one doing this project. Relate what they've done to what we're asking you to do. So that is how we evaluate when it comes down to marking our strengths and weaknesses within that evaluation is how does that vendor's experience relate to what we're asked to our project, how we're asking them to do. When we talk about a technical approach, what are those tasks outlined? How long will it take you to do? Be as descriptive as you can. Tell me which staff member is going to be doing what of those tasks, so that you've provided their resume. That type of stuff is all what goes into a great proposal. Any questions on any of that?
We do have two similar questions in the chat pertaining to how a new company with no past performance can be awarded a contract.
So I would say in an RFP process, if we are asking for relatable experience and you don't have any, you're probably not going to be awarded that contract. If the award is based on lowest cost meeting specs, and you can meet the specifications of the contract and perhaps then you provide the best cost, then you perhaps could be awarded. But if it's an RFP where we're asking for that experience and you don't have any, you're not going to be awarded. But like I said, if you have experience in a private sector that's relatable, then try to make sure that when you're explaining that experience that you are relating it to the same. So given our power washing example, tell me how many floors the buildings are that you've done this in. Tell me what the square footage is that you've painted. Tell me, I mean, normally those are going to be lowest cost meeting specs, but regardless, just in example purposes, relate what you've done in the past down to the specifics of what you've done to try to make it relatable to what we're asking you to do. That's your best bet.
Excellent. Next question, what does financial stability consist of?
So it could, depending on the solicitation, and it will tell you under that section 4 what we're requiring. On the norm, we have an attachment that is basically a checkbox that's signed that says you have no judgments against you. It says when your last audit was, things like that. So that attachment is just something that is a check mark. Yes, I've done this, 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 and this, and I sign it. If we are asking, we could ask if it's needed, give me the last statements give me your financial statements for the last 3 years. And we would have to have somebody that knows what they're doing look at those financial statements to say, yes, you are in good financial standing. I would say that is only done on large RFPs where it's important to know that you're in good financial standing because you're dealing with our money or something like that. So normally, on the norm, I would say most of the bids that are out there have that condition where you're just agreeing to 1, 2, and 3. And you can go out on PNC's website. There is the list of those attachments that you can see before they're even posted. And one of those is the financial condition. And it's literally just like a check mark that says you're in good financial standing. You agree that you're that. This is the date of my last audit, and you sign it.
All right. If a proposal is submitted by a vendor with a list of personnel and their specialized background, but by the time the contract is awarded, those persons are no longer with the vendor, can that impact the award?
Yeah. Yes, because if you're submitting a proposal that says these are the people that are going to be doing the work, then those are the people that need to be doing the work. Because your award could be based on their expertise. So, yeah. If not, I mean, there could be information in the solicitation that says if you're going to replace somebody on the team, what needs to happen. So through the life of the contract, somebody could go take a different job, right? So, but if there could be information in the solicitation document that says if you're going to replace a member of this team that was part of your proposal, then you need to notify the contracting agency and get their approval, So there could be information during the life of the contract, but during the bid process, yes, whoever you're proposing in your proposal needs to be who you're giving us.
Okay. Are there any options for the state to award partial payment before goods delivery is completed if a small vendor is awarded a large goods contract and they possibly have company funding problems?
So as the norm, our purchasing offices, our fiscal offices pay net 30 from completion of project. So I should say from receipt of invoice that has then been approved by whoever. If you have furnished and delivered a certain percentage of that project, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to invoice it, but that would be on a case-by-case basis to talk to the contract administrator on it. If you have furnished and delivered 400 of the widgets out of 700, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to invoice for those 400 up front. But we're never going to pay up front before you deliver. I will say that. We don't ever pay for goods or services preemptively. We wait until we have received, and then you can invoice for it.
All right, last question in this round. What is the requirement for small businesses to have a financial audit? Most small businesses cannot afford a full financial audit.
I think it would depend on the actual bid. So it would depend on what they're buying as to whether they would say that that's okay or not. I know in some of our janitorial contracts that are definitely with small businesses, they'll put on that financial condition that we're under a certain dollar threshold. We don't have an audit, and we accept that. But that's a question to ask during the question and answer period for that particular procurement.
All right.
All right. Cruising right along. We're going to get into how to respond to these solicitations. We're going to talk about direct, the e-procurement collaborative space. We're going to talk about EVP solicit, search, and response. So direct is via over email. Normally, we use that for the RFQ, the IQR. Just know that any quotes that are just standard quotes that are on your letterhead, all of those need to be current, less than 30 days. With your RFQ responses and with your bid responses, there is a spot on the execution page that you can change how long that bid is good for. So be mindful of that. It does allow you to say this is good for 120 days or whatnot. The e-procurement collaborative space is a space within e-procurement. It replaced the old e-quote. I don't know if you've been around as long as I have, but there used to be the old e-quote in the old e-procurement system, where when we are in the initial phases of setting up our requisition, we can reach out directly to vendors through EVP to respond to an e-quote. So we'll get into a little bit of that. And then the EVP would be responding either by mail or most likely by the sourcing tool. And we're going to get into the weeds of the sourcing tool. Just know that agencies use the EVP vendor search to find those vendors, whether it is direct solicitation through the collaborative or through EVP or through finding vendors to send stuff through email. That's why it's so important that your EVP is up to date, because that's who we are contacting. So the collaborative space is an informal quoting space with pricing request function through the e-procurement system. So where we can set up a requisition and directly send that requisition over to vendors to provide quotes for goods and services from multiple vendors at the same time. We at DOA are not currently using this. We prefer to do that through email for small purchases, but it is out there for agencies to use. It does make that vendor sign those terms and conditions, and so therefore it can be used for purchases up to 50 grand. There are training resources on the eProcurement website about the collaborative space. If you ever get notified on it, if you have a problem with, hey, I got this weird email from eProcurement, call the help desk. They can help you walk through it on what you need to do. But there's also that training if you want to figure it out. It is there for you. EVP is our big old though. This is where we post our formal solicitations. So this, when we talk about posting formal solicitations, this is where EVP now has replaced IPS. It allows state agencies to advertise solicitations for goods and services, seek open and fair competition. It allows us to post our tabulations once the bids are open, and also post awards. Like I said, IPS used to go away after award, after 30 days. Now those are out there indefinitely if it started in EVP. So you can look up and see who is awarded. It allows you to market your goods and services because it is linked, and you get those direct solicitations for anything that you're registered under the commodity code in which we are posting that bid under. It allows you to search 24/7 for opportunities. You can go out there and look out what's on EVP currently and be able to respond. It is free registration. It allows for free notifications of those business opportunities, and it allows you to see who bid and who was awarded. This is the new EVP. You can sign in here with your login. This is where you register. This is where you update all that registration. This is the website that they just put into the chat, is evp.nc.gov website. When you get there, this is what it looks like. If you hit browse solicitations, that is where you respond to formal solicitations. You can look by agency, you can look by commodity code, you can do keyword search, all under browse solicitations. If you are not registered with you as a hub vendor, you should be registered. Sign in and register. When you go into your registration and you start looking, it will allow you to have multiple contacts, multiple addresses, multiple different areas of contact. So if you had like a financial contact, if you had a sales contact, it allows you to set up these different contacts. Just make sure that your remit to address is where your EIN number is associated. It will also allow you, when you're in there, to select, yes, I want to receive the notifications from EVP, and yes, I want to be able to receive purchase orders in eProcurement. The only way you show up in eProcurement as a potential supplier is if you have that button checked beside yes, eProcurement. So make sure that that is checked. It allows us to browse vendors, because that's when you register. That's how we look. It allows you to browse vendors. So let's say that there's a big bid out there and you are a subcontractor, small business, but you want to team up with maybe a prime contractor that would actually submit the bid. You can browse the vendors just as well as we can browse the vendors to help look out and reach out and touch somebody that you might want to partner up with. So that's there. The other tip suggestion that I have is maybe there's a pre-proposal conference or a site visit. Show up, meet people. Nothing's keeping you from talking to the other vendors that are there. Maybe you provide, I don't know, floor maintenance, and you're at a janitorial contract. You don't provide janitorial services, but maybe you do stripping and waxing of floors. Maybe you want to team up with people. It's a good opportunity for networking. Once you're in here and we're browsing for solicitations, there is a little button that says filters right here. You can filter, which pops open this window. You can search by category. You can look for solicitations that are currently open, that are pending selection, that are awarded, that are canceled. You can search for when they were created, when they were modified, if there's a site visit, if there's a bid opening date. So you can search under all of those. The departments are included universities, community colleges, municipalities, all of them post out here. You can also export your results out into a Excel spreadsheet that then you can look through. So all of that is out there. Once you are in and you found one that you potentially like, this is for road and railway construction materials. This is actually aggregate for the ABC Commission that Department of Transportation had out there. If you are signed in under your registration with the EVP, this button will become available for you to hit respond to solicitation. When you hit respond to solicitation, it is going to send you an email with a link into the sourcing tool to actually upload your response. So that is what happens when you hit respond to solicitation, is that if this agency, Department of Transportation, is using the sourcing tool, it will send you the link to the sourcing tool event that you actually upload your solicitation. Speaking of the sourcing tool, just know that that is also a piece of e-procurement. There is training on all of the sourcing tool information, how to respond to a sourcing event on their website. Just know that you might have to register with the Ariba network as well to be able to get into the tool. You have to be registered with EVP to even get the opportunity to bid. And then you might have to also set up a registration with Ariba. EVP username and password will be required because that's the only way that that respond to posting link comes open. Vendor responds within the system to each of the sections of the content of the tool. So it allows us, which is fantastic, that if we require that license, it allows you to upload that separately. And that way it's a notice to you and a notice to us. Are they responsive? If we require that, we can make it a separate thing that you can't even move on without uploading it. Nothing saying that you don't upload a piece of paper that says happy birthday, but it still is there to be able to be found responsive. When you get into the sourcing event in Ariba, this is kind of what it looks like. This is kind of what it looks like. It's going to tell you how many days you have remaining. This is the bid opening time. When we talk about that time, that is when this system physically locks you out and you cannot get in there anymore. Do not wait until the bid opening time to start uploading your stuff. You can upload days in advance. You can upload weeks in advance. Just know that potentially we could change something with an addendum. But don't wait until today at 2 o'clock to actually upload your response, because it will not let you in. That is when we then hold the bid opening and go through the bids. You can view the prerequisites. You can get into the actual content, and that is where, when you talk about the content, you're uploading your response to each one of those sections. Any questions on how to submit a bid? So not understanding the difference between EVP and sourcing. So EVP is where we have the posting and where we have the bid search or the vendor search and your vendor registration. Sourcing is where you actually respond to a solicitation. So when it's posted on EVP, you hit respond to posting and it will take you into our tool that you upload your response to that sourcing. That is also where, if we're asking you to submit questions, you would submit your questions through the sourcing tool. So it is the link and the communication center between us and the vendors for a formal solicitation. I hope that explains that better.
So Meredith, we also have a hand raised.
Okay.
I think the rest of the questions in the chat, John is fielding those and Angela. And so I was going to go to hand raised by Terza.
Hey, how you guys doing today? I just had a quick question. Do you guys provide services on helping people submit the bids, like during the procurement process and things like that?
Okay, and Our MBDA Center offers assistance. Well, actually, I'm sorry, that was for prime contractors. We do have resources that we may be able to refer, like the small business centers at community colleges, but Hub does not specifically offer that service.
Okay, so we would just reach out to you guys about the community colleges, like for instance, if Wake Tech provided something like that, you guys will be able to lead us in the right direction?
Yes, I am going to refer our business development manager, Sharonetta McIntyre, will generally assist with resources that may be able to help.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, continuing on.
Yes.
All right, and I think Shay just put her information, and Angela Sellers is with MBDA. She's there too in the chat.
Thank you all.
All right, so we're going to get into evaluating. So now we have submitted our bid, it's come to us, and we're going to talk about how we evaluate your bids. We're going to talk about the actual bid opening, evaluation methods, we're going to talk about reference checks, that price matching opportunity with the Executive Order 50, and then clarifications and BAFOs. So during the bid, if it is a formal bid, so it was posted on an IFB or an RFP document, it was out on EVP for a minimum of 10 days, and now we have the actual bid opening time. We do this live. So bid openings are either in person or my office is doing them, and I believe most offices are doing them over a Teams call. They are on a certain time, date, location, wherever they are doing it is specified within the solicitation document. Late bids or proposals will not be accepted. So if for some reason somebody's still using mail and that is not to that office physically, then they will mark it as late and they will not open it. If they're using the sourcing tool, like I said, it cuts off at that time. If you haven't finished uploading, it will cut you off. You will not be able to upload your bid. During the bid opening, we take attendance. So we might say, hey, are there any vendors on the call? Can you put your information as to who you are and what firm you're with in the chat window so we can document who attended the bid opening. There's usually two people from the purchasing office on the call. That is so that one can read out the bids and the other one can document it as we go along. Normally, after that's open, we can go through and explain the next steps, whether it's got to go to PNC or DIT, those approval pieces, maybe it's a big RFP, so I'm going to go through and mark it for responsiveness, and then it's going to go to the evaluation team, and from there, then they're going to evaluate and give their recommendations, so all of that's going to take a little bit of time. But during that, really during the posting of the bid, during the entire bid process, your contact during that process and procedures is the purchasing office. That purchasing agent that is listed on that solicitation, that is who you need to contact. We can pretty much tell you once we open the bids where it is in the process, and that's about it. So we can say it's still with the evaluation team, or it's now with PNC for final approval. But we can tell you where it is in the process. We can't tell you what we're doing in the process. Everything remains confidential until the time of award. But you contact the purchasing office if you have those questions, if you have any of that type of stuff, and they can give you that info. The tabulations are posted to EVP. Often it's just going to be who bid. So pricing usually is then updated once we award, and that allows for any negotiations that we need to get into to happen before we post the final approved pricing up for award. So we've talked about these different methods a little bit, the lowest cost method. So that's where we award based on lowest cost, meeting the requirements or specifications that offer. So it's kind of a out the door. If you meet all those requirements, then it's based on who offers the lowest cost. When we talk about lowest cost, we're talking about total cost of ownership. So we have had things where I bought a generator, an emergency generator for facility management, but the current generator was dead. We were renting a generator. When we put the bid out, one vendor offered a lower priced generator, but it was going to take longer for it to get to us. So we were able to do the math of having to continue to rent the current generator plus then the lowest cost for the new generator, and was actually cheaper to go with the higher cost generator. So it's total cost of ownership that has been documented in that file to go with the lowest cost.
Oh, you can see
73.
I'm gonna mute somebody. All right. Best value is a weighted method. So this is where we can assign, we want to award something on other than just cost. And so we can assign points to different criteria that we've listed versus the cost. However those points are assigned is going to be listed in the solicitation document, but we will still then document our strengths and weaknesses for the different criteria, assign the point value, most points wins, right? So that's normally where we put more points towards the technical side of the criteria versus the cost. So we're able to award the highest points to get something. It might cost us more money, but it offers the best value to the state. The other type is best value narrative method. This is under the administrative code. It allows the vendors to offer the most appropriate products or solution to meet our objectives. We're able to document our strengths and weaknesses for each of the criteria listed in the bid, and then write a narrative justification as to the offset between what the vendor provides is the best value to the state versus what it costs. And so it's a narrative justification. It is with documented strengths and weaknesses. It's all within the solicitation document on what we will be looking for that and documenting. So those are, so we have numbers, and then we have best value narrative version. Those are our three different types of methods of evaluating formal bids. We talk about reference checks. Reference section can be added to the solicitation document. We could ask for those references. PMC has a standard reference check attachment that asks the vendor to submit not only who the contact is, but what you have done for that vendor too. They can be a requirement that you submit those references. We have the option to say we may contact them. Really, if we are contacting them, they are used to confirm that the vendor says what they have done, has done what they said they have done, and that they've offered products or services of the same size and scope as to what we're asking them to do. The state will ask those references all the same questions to get the responses back to evaluate those. And we're looking, but be on the lookout for the vendor must provide or may provide, because that will be listed in that requirement section. So things change when we're going through the evaluation phase of procurement. So if we have something where you've submitted your proposal, we don't really understand what something that's in there. So you've given us information, but we don't, we can't figure something out. We might send a request for clarification. It's usually a yes, no. We are not asking you to change anything you have sent us. You cannot change your pricing. You cannot submit additional information. We are just clarifying something that you submitted in your proposal. So the state, we can't ask you for additional things to be submitted that wasn't already a requirement to be submitted. But we could ask you, when it comes to price, we could say we were asking for 5 widgets. You told me that they were $2 a piece and your total cost is $12 because you can't do math. Is it really $10? Like, we could ask for that kind of clarification, but we cannot alter your price. A backflow is used when we get into negotiations. So according to the administrative code, we can enter into negotiations with vendors during the procurement process. We could negotiate anything. We could negotiate, maybe you provided all these different phases and we only have enough budget for phase 1 and phase 2. So we want to limit what we're doing. We could say that our budget is this and we can't afford to do this. Can you drop your price? We could be limited. Hey, you told me that you were going to do this in this amount of time. Can you shorten it to this amount of time? Anything that would change a vendor's proposal becomes then negotiations. We don't have to negotiate. We don't have to negotiate with all vendors. We could negotiate with just one vendor, but we can get into those negotiations. Those negotiations can happen over phone or over email, but anything that then is going to be confirmed that we all agree upon is then done on a document called a best and final offer. So we will write that up, that this is what we all have discussed and this is what we agree upon to become part of the contract. Sign this document that you agree to, that then will become part of the contract. All right, Executive Order 50 is an attachment that will be in the back of an IFB because it is for goods only. It is a price matching opportunity that Beth Perdue put into place when she was government. It is used for goods only, not services. The vendor must indicate if they want to participate, and what it allows is that if you are a North Carolina-based business, your home turf is North Carolina, and we get back a bid that is higher from an out-of-state vendor for a good, we will give you the opportunity to match that out-of-state vendors if you are within 5% or $10,000 of the out-state vendor, and then you could match their pricing. You have to say, yes, I want to participate in this, and then it has to be within that window, and the out-of-state vendor is higher or is lower. We just ask you, do you want to match that out-of-state vendor? You have the right to say no, but it's in an effort to keep those dollars within the state. It's only on goods. It's an attachment in the back of an IFB. Any questions on evaluating?
There is a question. Is there a typical notification time frame for winning, losing, or rejected bids?
I would love to say yes, but no. It depends. It depends on the complexity of the procurement. It depends on if it's got to go through, if it's a DIT procurement, it's got to go through security reviews. If it's over a certain dollar amount, there's several approvals on the PNC side based on delegations of who has to actually approve the award. If it's an evaluation, it's got to go through the evaluation team. If there's questions when they get into evaluate, if we're getting into negotiations. So there is not a set time frame. I would say any formal bid, you're looking at least from start to finish, at least a 60-day process, if not longer than that. But it just really depends on the steps that it has to go through for those approvals and the steps that it has to go through for evaluation that then can base on the award. Yeah. But your notification of that is out on EVP. So you can be monitoring EVP when it's out there. It will say pending selection. And then once awarded, it will say awarded and it will show you that. But if you want to know where we are in those approval flows or in those processes, contact the purchasing office and they can at least say it hasn't gotten to PNC yet. It's still with the evaluation team or whatnot. It can kind of tell you where we are in those processes.
Next question, during bid opening, is it okay to contact with purchasing agent? And this says with better version of the bid. And I'm going to ask if I think it's Ellie wants to unmute and clarify. And if you are speaking, we can't hear you. I thought I heard some indication. Maybe not.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so to clarify the order,
So it's not changing the content of the bid?
Hold on one second. Go ahead.
It took a while for.
Okay. Yeah, not changing the content.
Teresa, I'm muting you so I can hear. Go ahead. Go ahead, Edie.
Okay,
She'll
again,
need-
so not to change the content, it was just the order, like the order pages, so
Oh.
that they can flow better. Is that allowed?
Yes, that is totally fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Next question, is it common to get several requests to extend an evaluation period over 1 year?
The common to extend an evaluation period. It depends. If it's something, I know we've had a problem with an evaluation period extending longer than the bids were even valid, but that was because we were trying to find money to be able to do what all the bids came back for. So there could be different reasons as to why that evaluation period is extended. And it could be something as simple as we're trying to look for money to be able to meet the bids that came in. But on the norm, it shouldn't take a year to evaluate a bid. I wouldn't say on the norm, that wouldn't be common.
All right. And last question, usually how long does it take to receive a public record request from the state for a previously awarded vendor?
That depends on how much information you give us to be able to find the contract. So public records request, which we're going to get into, should be submitted to the agency that awarded the contract. So that's where if it's a DPS contract, you need to contact DPS public records request to be able to submit that and give them as much information as you know, who the vendor is, what the contract number is, as much as information as you can give them to be able to find the information. Some public records departments are better than others because some purchasing agencies organization is better than others. But that potentially is what's taking so long, as they can't, they're having trouble finding all of that. The other thing that can cause time to take on that is if it is a large RFP, lots of responsive, our public records department has to go through and redact any confidential information. So if we had 35 bid responses, that's 35 bid responses that our public records department has to go through and redact. So that can take time too. So just be mindful of that when you're asking for it.
All right. I think that takes care of our questions and we can proceed, Meredith.
All right. We're getting into the award process. So you have now been awarded a contract. Woo! All right. So we're going to go into notifications that you get, purchase orders, and then invoicing so you can get paid. So you're notified. The purchasing agency will send you usually a certification of award memo. We also post that award out on EVP. All documentation is then attached, including your executed contract. And the certification of award, any of that information is attached in e-procurement. You should receive a purchase order. And then the award is posted to, this says IPS, that should say EVP, within 3 days, and it's posted indefinitely. So I need to update that. So now it's not posted for just 30 days, it's posted out there indefinitely on EVP. Once the contract award is received, vendor may contact the contract administrator. So now you can talk to the guy that turns the wrench that actually knows about his boiler. You no longer have to go through procurement. You can go talk to the contract administrator. So the purchase order, what you need to be looking for on the purchase order is the description of items and services. So if it was something small and you were sending us goods, make sure there are 2 lines for goods and shipping, because shipping is not a good and therefore wouldn't be charged for 1.75. So description of items and services, the bid contract number, any accounting codes, pricing, the delivery schedule, payment terms, effective dates of the contract. We have the option to put renewals up front on a PO, but potentially they're not there because that would be another year's worth of budget. And so a lot of agencies don't put the renewals. You get a new PO for every year of the contract. Transportation, freight, shipping, those types of things. Terms and conditions, payment terms and conditions are on POs. Comments to the vendor. So the e-procurement system in the PO system allows us to submit comments directly to the vendor, which is nice so that you can see those comments. Maybe it's something where you gave us a quote for large batteries and we didn't tell you until the PO that we don't have a loading dock. So now you're going to have to lift every single one of those batteries into our options. So just be mindful that there potentially could be comments to vendors on the PO. It also could give you the information of who the contract administrator is now that you need to contact versus the purchasing office. So when you are submitting your invoice, so important, make sure your EVP remit to address is the same as your EIN number. So it will not delay payment. It will not delay. We cannot in our new accounting system be able, it pulls that remit to address out of EVP and out of the purchase order to be able to submit you payment. So just be mindful of that. That right now could be causing delays in payment. So that remit to bill to address, the person that you're supposed to submit the invoice to is the bill to address. Don't send it to the purchasing office unless it says that. Otherwise, send it to the actual division that's buying it. Include the following. Include what you've done. Services completed. This is where if you furnished and delivered 14 of the 20 that you were supposed to, I would assume that you could invoice for those because we have received them within e-procurement. As soon as we hit receive, that means we've gotten it and you can invoice for it. So know that before we hit receive, it is on you. When we hit receive, it means that we have received whatever we ordered. The problem and the nuance of knowing that anything's not there, it's broken or whatnot is on us because we have received it. Before we hit receive, it is your problem to get it to us. So that's where we can contact you and say it's broken, it doesn't work, I'm not going to receive it because you can't invoice for something that's broken. So that's where that e-procurement helps us track. I have received it, now you can invoice me for it. Typically, the state pays net 30. That's 30 days from approval of invoice, whatever that approval flow is from the division to the department to get that paid. Check writes are on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but we do, because it's 2024, we do have the capability to be able to send you electronic payments. You have to sign up for those separately with OSC in the state comptroller's office. So that is the link there for electronic trans EFT payment. Questions on payment invoicing award?
No questions in the chat. Let's see. Sorry.
Additional services lifting due to no dock is added. So I would say that you agreed upon that pricing and you didn't ask the question. So potentially, no, we could not change the pricing. We could fight that. But if you would like to charge for that, we do have the capability to make changes, but we have to agree to those changes on that would be my answer to that. So just know there could be pushback on those changes that you didn't ask about having the loading dock and didn't say that it had to be there.
All right.
Contract monitoring. So now we're talking about the back end. You now have this contract and we're going to manage this contract. We're going to talk about management, inspections, testing, renewals, amendments, vendor protests, and public records requests. So always a good idea. Let's all get off on the right foot. It has taken a lot of work to get here. It's taken us 2.5 hours to get to where we have a contract. And that's just talking about it. You can't imagine the amount of time to actually put it together. So know that we want the contract. We want to work with great vendors. Great vendors want to work with us. It takes a lot of work to terminate a contract, to start it over. We want to make sure we're all on the same page. It's always a great idea to get it kicked off together on the same page so we know how it's supposed to operate. We can clarify our roles and responsibilities. Maybe your sales guy is the one that submitted a bid, but now I have a technician that's actually coming to do the work. And maybe I need to send my bills or come into somebody else. So make sure that you identify those roles and responsibility and clarify any delivery expectations and goals and objectives that we want to get this contract up and going. Inspections and testing, know that we are documenting, so you should also be documenting for damaged goods, inaccurate order, or late shipments. So notify. We will try to notify you if we see any of that. Notify us if you have any of that. So we will try to get on the same page and make it work and get to a compromise of how we can get whatever we're asking to get, and you can get paid for providing whatever we're asking you to get. Know that invoice will not be paid until the using agency completes inspection of the goods are accepted. That's where in e-procurement we hit, yes, we have received. So delivery is not considered to have occurred if you are installing equipment until it's up and running. There's no waste. It's good to go, and we've signed off on that invoice. Vendor is responsible for leaving any installation area clean and ready to use. So if there is testing, it should be part of that scope of work to make sure that that equipment is up and running. Vendor complaints. So just know that inspections and complaints are documented by the contract administrator. So they try first to work with you to fix any problems. Work with them. Try to come to an agreement. But if they get to the point where they feel like they are not getting anywhere, they can come to the purchasing office and say, I want to file a formal vendor complaint against this vendor. If you get a formal vendor complaint in writing from an agency purchasing office, pay attention to it. Don't just let it sit there. There are deadlines to respond, and there are actions to cure the problem. So either you have to sign it that says, yes, I agree to those actions to cure, or you could request, hey, I don't agree with this complaint. I want to set up a meeting and talk about it, or I want to say, this is where I feel like I am on this. Just make sure that you meet any deadlines. And if there is a cure action, that you do it or voice your opinion on how you don't agree with it. So don't just ignore it, because we could terminate a contract just simply because you ignored a formal vendor complaint. So just be mindful that there's information in there. If you have any questions, there's people to contact. All of that is within that formal vendor complaint. We talk about those renewals. So 1-year contract with 2 optional renewals. The standard for all state contracts is 3 years, which could be 1 year with 2 optional renewals. If it needs to go any longer than 3 years, we would have gotten approval for that up front. Renewals are option and do not have to be exercised. It's up to the state whether they want to option that renewal. There could be many reasons. It's not just performance-based on why we didn't option that renewal. We ran out of money. We no longer need this service. Maybe the scope has changed so much we feel like we need to go back out for bid. So there could be multiple reasons as to why we did not exercise a renewal. We do not have to notify you that we are not exercising a renewal. We will notify you if we are exercising the renewal. The renewal agreement is sent into a vendor. Oftentimes it's done on an amendment document to exercise that renewal. The state may, my agency does, we generate a new PO for every year that we exercise that renewal. So your new PO would have the renewal agreement signed and executed attached to that purchase order exercising that renewal. Amendments are used, this is one of those documents of change, are used to change anything during the life of the contract. It could change rates, it could extend longer than that 3-year term if we needed more time. It could change scope, it could change cost, it could change anything in a contract. So if anything that changes, it would be done on an amendment. Do not let a contract administrator say, just add that to my bill. Because if it's not in writing, it didn't happen according to purchasing and according to fiscal. So we're not going to pay for it if it's not attached to an actual amendment. So if you have a landscaping bid and he's like, just take care of the ants and just add that to my bill, you'd be like, wait. If that's not in writing, it didn't happen. I can't bill you for it. It needs to be amended to the contract. That is a big important. We are the document people, and if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So make sure that your contract to cover your butt and our butt is all together and has everything written down. We talk about protests. So this is in the actual procurement process. So if you have a contract that has been awarded that you participate, do not agree. Can you hear me? My earphones just down. So vendors may submit a public written request to protest a bid if you participated in the bid process. They must be submitted within 30 consecutive calendar days to the contract agency that you are protesting the award. The protest letter must contain specific reasons and documentation as to why you are protesting the award. Vendor protests are different than public records requests. If you want to see why it was awarded a certain way, that is a public records request. If you want to protest the award because you feel like it was not awarded properly or some procedure was not followed, then that is a vendor protest. So public records requests you submit to the agency that awarded that contract. That's where I said, give as much information as you can so we can find the contract. You can ask for anything to see in that contract file. So mainly, probably what you want to see is the award recommendation letter, but you can see all the other vendors' bids. You can see all of the evaluation matrix. You can see all of the reasons why we did, because we documented all of it. So just know that that's all open to public records, and know as a vendor, when you're submitting your bid, it's up to you to document what you want to be kept confidential. Pricing can never be confidential, but if you had some kind of trade secrets or something like that that you want kept confidential, it's up to you to mark that. Then we will redact it before we send out a public records request. Most agencies have an online form. I know we have an online form to submit a public records request. So I would just Google search Department of Public Transportation and then find their public records request form. Note that when a bid is currently out, you can use the question and answer period to ask, what are you currently paying? Who currently has the contract? But most of the current contract will not be released while we are actively bidding. So just be mindful of that. You can use the question and answer period to find out how much we're paying, but we will not release the entire public records while we are actively bidding. So be mindful of that. These are the websites that I talked about today. So we have statewide procurement that's got their information. That's where you can find the administrative links to the administrative code and the general statutes and those state term contracts and links to EVP and all of that. Statewide DIT procurement, statewide procurement office for information technology is there. That's where their state term contracts are. EVP is where all those training resources, EVP is where you register. E-procurement is where all those training resources are. And then the Hub Office website is just a great tool for you as a hub vendor. Check out their calendar and all of their other resources.